Yeah, there we go. I think with that, all of you sissy viewers out there will be able to see all of their thighs. Or maybe I should sit a bit more angled like this so you can see everything a little better. There we go. So yes, welcome back. This is the second and most likely the second last video I'm doing on the Blue Archive 1 month anniversary campaign. The last video is probably not going to be related to the event itself, more so to the these that I got at some point, so that will be a much shorter casual video. But yes, welcome back. Today we'll be talking about the rest of the event. For those of you who didn't watch part 1, no, that's fine. You don't need that to know what's going on here. Everything that I'll be talking about is stuff that I have newly experienced since the end of the first video, basically since the event was split into 2 halves. With a bit of the stuff starting the second half, I figured, why not I do a video at the start on some of the stuff I managed to experience, then we do a second half video on the rest of it, since as you can see, the first half video already took up quite a bit of time. So what I'm thinking of doing is to go through each of the collab locations in chronological order, in part because it feels like it will make for a better flow for the video as well. Because like I mentioned in the previous video, not all locations were equally involved in the collab. Some, like Pasela, the karaoke for example, had their own collab menu as well as a special room for you to use for like, the karaoke when you go there. Then you also had some like Melon Books where yeah, you had the board in the store, but aside from that, they were only involved as far as the whenever you spend 500 yen, you would get one of the novelty cards up to a cap. And from the ones I went to for this second half, it would basically go from like those that were more involved and then go down a little to visiting everything else in the middle, which some of it was still interesting. Like there was one with a pretty interesting art gallery just like down the middle. And then at the end, we'll go through the last stuff, which is the rest of like the Pasela, as well as the animate parts of the collab. So those might be more interesting as well. So, you know, you get your second act low point like in all of those like hip and cool Marvel movies that no one watches anymore, right? But enough of me making unfunny jokes. Let's get right into the event. And I did not even hit my mic this time. So the first location I went to was the shooting range, which, yes, this is Japan, not the land of the freedom guns. So the guns all are not live ammunition, they're all just airsoft guns. But even then, it was a pretty enjoyable experience. So the first thing you'll see when you go down the stairs into the store, since it's located in the basement, is just the standee of Hina in full view. Most likely just to make sure that you don't get lost, because the location of the store itself was pretty far off compared to most other locations. Like, if you look at the map over here, this is where the main street of Akihabara is, and that is how much further away the store itself actually is. Which, if you compare it to almost everything else which is along the main street, it's about maybe a 10 minutes walk, but it's in an area that's quite remote. And being located in the basement of a very normal looking building, it was kind of hard to tell unless you were using Google Maps, which you probably were since every one of us aren't boomers here. So being a shooting range located in the basement with the entire rack of like rental guns just on display there like that, it really gave it the feel of a military bunker, which really added to the aesthetics of the entire thing. Apparently for the sake of this collab, they were allowing like complete walk-ins for the entire month of the collab, so in order to ensure that I wouldn't end up being stuck in a huge crowd there, I decided to go on a Monday night. Though the store itself was pretty friendly as well, like they knew that a lot of newcomers would be coming for this thing, and they were quite willing to give you a rundown of how to shoot, how to reload the thing. For the new generation Airsoft which Tokyo Marui has, which the firing range was stocking, so these were meant to simulate as accurately as possible the recoil as well as the weight of a gun, so you really got the feel of a real gun. A real gun, not a real gun like the thing that from that one anime. But yeah, as someone who has come from a country where forced conscription for males is a thing, sort of like what South Korea does, judging from the recoil and the weight of the scar, it really does feel like it should be quite realistic. At least it's heavier and the I thought something just dropped over there. Yeah, okay, it seems fine enough. So for the scar, it felt heavier and the recoil felt harder than the actual like military bullpup we had back then. So I would say that yeah, it most likely should be at least realistic to a gun. Whether it's realistic to the scar, I have no experience with one, so I can't say for sure. But so I tried a bunch of stuff like just the standard shooting. They also gave out this like Blue Archive specific shooting paper as well, which you can imagine since they're only giving out a small number per person, you kind of run out of that very quickly. So you just end up like shooting everything else. Like they actually have targets in the distance for you to fire at, as well as a quick fire challenge thing where you just push a button and like different points will light up. You can just fire each one of them. I think the shortest I got it to was slightly under 10 seconds, which I don't know how impressive that is. I haven't fired a gun in like since I was 18, so yeah, it has been quite a while to say the least. Oh shit, it has been quite a while, huh? No, yeah, for the most part, the collab is just the shooting paper as well as the novelty cards that every other store is giving out. Overall, it was a very fun experience. Like, even though I've lived in Japan for quite a while, I've never actually bothered like looking into or going to one of these airsoft locations before, in part due to the fact that it always felt kind of intimidating. You know, since they typically have a lot of regulars there as well, so it feels kind of awkward to go there alone. So this was a good opportunity to go to it. Target people that you get, you can bring back with you as well, so yeah, it had its own interesting memorabilia as well. That, and I was also gifted with the wonderful souvenir of having a muscle cramp for the next few days. But thankfully, that actually healed before the next time I had to set up for the collab, which was on the 19th when the Animate pop-up store would open up. So for those of you who saw my previous video, which was more of a warning thing for those who were going for the collab itself during this period, but in that video I mentioned the Animate store quite a bit because the logistics for that one was truly quite a surprise, like in more ways than one. For one thing, when the collab was initially announced, like the campaign for the entirety of Akihabara, the Animate one was announced, but unlike the Atore collab, this one had not yet mentioned what would be sold. And in fact, what was gonna be sold was not mentioned until I think the day before, when they had the live stream, and during the live stream they revealed everything that would be sold at the collab, which it feels a little rushed. But thankfully, the collab actually had pop-up stores in other parts of Japan as well. So I guess in terms of stock, these people wouldn't be too hard-pressed. So my initial plan was to go down, be there first one in at 10 AM when the store opens, buy everything that I want, quickly take pictures before the place gets flooded with humans, and then quickly leave and go and explore the rest of the campaign, hopefully to get everything done in one day. Though, yeah, that didn't work out in the end. It felt like due to the fact that the Animate collab released so little information, and most of it was released so last minute, that for the most part it was very hard to plan stuff around it. And even when I did, it's like it all went awry because the logistics of how it was done was completely messed up. Like, so I got in at 10 AM as expected, got up there one of the first few people, the floor below where the collab was actually like supposed to be, and they were giving out like waiting tickets, which, you know, I thought it wouldn't be that bad. They did the same with like the event itself, the second anniversary event, where you kind of had the waiting tickets and you could come back later. So I thought, yeah, you know, take it at 10 AM. Maybe I was a bit slow. Maybe other people had already flooded the thing. Maybe it would be like 10:30 or something. You know, it wouldn't be that late that I'll be able to go in, right? No, 7:20 PM. Like, you're gonna wait the entire day to go in, like more than 9 hours just to get into the store. As you can imagine, that's a lot of time, so good thing there was the Rico collab pop-up store on that same floor below the Blue Archive one for me to entertain myself for like 10 minutes at least. So yeah, my plans kind of just went out the window quicker than TK could in Angel Beats. The problem with the entire thing was just the fact that most stores had not opened at 10 AM, like Echigoya, which is the Airsoft shop, which was one of the closest points I was planning to detour to after I was done, would not open until like I think 11. So the first thing I did was to go down to the Rabbit Squad exhibition at the art museum slightly further north, a bit further off from the main road, which ended up being quite interesting to see. Like, they did prepare quite a lot of stuff. Like, it felt a bit more detailed than what they had done for the second anniversary, where the Rabbit Squad basically just had that little mesh tin cooking over there. Now they on the very scuffed looking roof of the art museum, which felt more like a basketball court or something, they kind of had like a full tent set up with everything that they had. You know, the tin that they had the funny bath scene in, so on and so forth, the ammunition, the grenades, all had like kind of interesting details on them. The claymore had the squad's insignia, so on and so forth. The roof itself looked pretty scuffed, but I guess it kinda, as a result, meshed in pretty well with the aesthetics of like them camping outdoors, although I was a little disappointed that it wasn't at an actual garden. When they initially said like they were gonna do this, Like, I thought it was gonna be at the first floor of the art gallery where there was actual like greenery outside. I thought it was gonna be an outdoor exhibit, but it just ended up being on the open air roof on like concrete ground instead, which, yeah, it could have been more interesting on the first floor where it would feel like they were actually camping in a park, but for the most part, the exhibit itself did a pretty good job of like showing everything that you would probably have wanted to see during that exhibition of the Rabbit Squad. So that was enjoyable. I just sat there for like a good 20 minutes just taking videos, just staring at uh the tents in the background and the other like stuff and props that they had put in the back, because those actually look quite interesting and detailed. I mean, you could say that like, yeah, it's just a barrel, yeah, it's just an ammunition box, but the way they had redesigned it to reimagine how most of the Rabbit Squad stuff would look like made it look pretty unique. Though that said, the art gallery did not actually have anything else to do with the collab other than hosting the exhibition itself. Like, the novelty card thing was not being done there. There was no board for you to scan there either. That was the one point that was not actively participating, even though it probably had the most standees compared to all other locations. So that said, by the time I was done with it, it was still only 10:40, so my plans still out the window harder than the scientists in Paprika. But that said, the next best plan I could come up with was to just go to every single other point that I could in the alternate clockwise circle and hopefully wind back around to the firing range at the very end, and then wind back down to Animate, which is a slightly longer route, but thankfully been there enough times to more or less be able to draft out a route, although that took a little bit of time. So instead of going that way, I just went the other way towards Donkey instead, which was the first point that we end up going to on this big long journey. So some of these points, like I mentioned before, aren't as interesting. Like for Donkey, I was a little bit disappointed because like Donkey typically sells a lot of anime goods nowadays. Like for those of you who have not been to Japan in a while, Donkey is like the more budget-friendly store that kind of sells everything from funny toys all the way to your daily necessities. So what they did recently is that they also started to sell like anime goods, particularly for the one in Akihabara, where you have like an entire section dedicated to it. And I recall for both Honkai and Genshin, they kinda had their own like mini pop-up stuff within the store as well. So I was expecting maybe you could potentially see something like Blue Archive, but for the most part it was just the standee, and since there wasn't really much else to look at other than like stuff from other animes. Moving on, next point we went to was the Taito Arcade. So props to the arcade for the tactical play, putting the standee at the third floor, so deep in that we would actually have to walk through almost the entirety of 3 floors just to find the standee. So way to go trying to get people to play something along the way there. But yeah, for the most part, the only problem was just that the arcade was quite small and narrow, so the standee was put in the equivalent of what would be a blind spot depending on how you're walking around. Like if you were to go in and turn left and walk straight, it would have been pretty obvious, but if like me, you would just walk straight and then turn left like further on, you would basically be in a blind spot where you would probably not have noticed it. Like for me, I was actively looking for it because I couldn't find it, and it just so happens I turned my head right. I was like, ooh, so that's where it was. Yeah, I just happened to notice that it was actually there, so thank God for that. So as you can see, we ended up finding Midori hiding in a corner of the arcade. No Yuzu, surprisingly enough. She's probably off hiding in a locker somewhere else, so maybe that's why she wasn't there. Same for Momoi, who is probably too busy BMing somebody in League of Legends, so that might be why she isn't there as well. So third point we went to was back to Melon Books. Melon Books we have been to before. I don't think there's too much to say. It's just that Koharu was inside, so haha, funny Loot Girl and Loot Bookstore. That aside, the was one thing I missed out the last time we went there, which was that outside the store there were actually like the little gachapon machines with a keychain that you could get. I mean, it's not too bad. Like looking at the keychain itself, it really was fine. I don't know if I'll actually use it, but it would be nice to keep around, since I don't know if they actually restock any of this, since most of them are typically Dojin keychains as well, so that would be a bit of a rare paper in the future. Though that said, there isn't really too much else to say about Melon Books. We've already talked about it once in the previous video as well, so if you're interested in seeing more about that one, you can find it in the description below. The next location I went to was Radio Kaikan, which, for those of you who remember, was the shop with Iroha on the first floor there, the Akiba gift as it's called if I'm not mistaken. So Aside from that, the Radio Kaikan itself actually kind of did have a few other shops that were part of the collab, one of which was Army Army. Some of you might know them since they do ship overseas a lot at very exorbitant shipping prices. So for Army Army, it's mostly the store is the same as usual. There's just a standee of both Azusa and Hifumi alongside one of the walls, which was a bit confusing at first because I saw both standees. I was like, oh, so they have 2 points here, huh? Well, that's a bit confusing. Let me try scanning both. So I scanned it both and it's the exact same thing. So it's kind of cute that they put the both of them together. I don't know why they didn't just put the both of them into one singular standee. I guess it looks kind of cuter when they're both separate individual ones, I guess. But it feels like they didn't have to put the QR code on both. That one was pretty much uneventful, so we just went up even more to Yellow Submarine, which is the card shop. So no surprise, you have your Mushi Queen over there, just stuck in full view alongside one of the walls as well for a card game shop. So I guess it's quite fitting. And also for this Yellow Submarine, it was pretty normal. Like there wasn't anything else new for it. And I think they had actually run out of the novelty cards anyway. So once we were done scanning QR codes for both this and the Hifumi one, we went back down and back to Atore, since there were mentions of, aside from the bookshop, there being a Tuli's coffee place which was supposed to have a standee as well in Atore. So the Tuli's was actually not in that side of Atore. You actually had to go across the street, like to the other side of the station, beside the Yodobashi camera, which for those of you who have been to Japan before, is a good few minutes walk away, like maybe 5 minutes or so from Atore itself. So that was a bit confusing since the entire length was called it. I mean, if I just use like Google Maps right from the start instead of being a boomer and being like, oh, I know this building, it's definitely here, I probably have found it a lot faster. But also for some reason unrelated to the Scavenger, Han, Juri and Chinatsu were just outside the toilet like this. Instead of going straight to Tuli's, I went down to the Shosen bookstore, which for you, also you do not know, Shosen is basically the word show, which is kind of like books, and sen, which is like a spring, so like a book spring, kinda, you know? So you might see where this is going. That's right, Megu was the one that was in the bookstore, being all confused that it wasn't a bookstore. So it was just up on the store where all the weeb stuff was placed, like just to make sure that people would be even more into it, I guess. They actually kind of lined like small, like buff stuff as well there, like the stool, as well as like a rubber duck and soap and all that, like to give it the onsen feel, like she was actually confused about the place. A bit of a nice touch. At least they did a little more than some of the other stores. The text on the side also just had her going like, what? You mean this isn't a hot spring? Or something like that. So adds to the charm a little bit, I guess. Though they also had run out of the novelty cards as well. So instead of buying stuff here, I just went to the bookstore which the Ui standee initially was in front of instead to get like stuff, since that way I could get the cards as well, since kind of want to collect those. So see if we can get all 28, which we'll see how that goes, since I'm still in the process, even as I record this on the 24th, of trying to get more. So that might be the last video, if I actually do it, would be maybe me like unpacking every single one of those cards, depending on whether I have enough to make it a good show or not. So once I was done there, we would go down to Tuli's, which thanks to its location, it was pretty close to the Yodobashi's, which was the next destination. So for Tuli's, it was pretty normal. You had Kanna there outside, the detective chief doggo person with her cup of coffee. And so I just got lunch there since we were already there. Aside from that, it was pretty normal. So after that, I went to Yodobashi, which is this one was kind of interesting, not so much because it was collab related, but more so because it actually showed me something that I did not know existed in Akiba to this extent. The one in Yodobashi, which is the electronics store, and also the local place the boomers go to rest or shopping, was located in a betting center. There was basically a betting center and also a driving course for those of you who play the old man sport on the top floor of the building. And it was actually pretty cool. Like, it looked a little scuffed when you enter the actual like route to the betting center, since it's just like very metal-y stairs, and when you look around, it's just the golf course on one side, the driving range rather, and on the other side you have the betting center, which on the one hand it felt kinda scuffed looking, but it was also very amazing at the same time. Like, I did not know that like they had such a big like facility on the roof. So seeing all of that there just like that was pretty interesting. Like it felt a little overwhelming at first, like walking out into the roof and being like, holy shit, there's just a giant range here. It's actually kind of cool. But yeah, the giant range aside, the Sandy there was Hibiki in the corner over there. Unfortunately, not in the funny sports day clothing. Missed a good opportunity there, Yosta. I mean, come on. Though after that, I went on to cut through Pasala, which was the karaoke I mentioned that I went to before. Took a picture of the QR code again, and then moved on to Onoden, which is basically the big building with the funny mascot Chow with the blue suspenders that no one ever enters unless they wanted to go to Kyo'mate Cafe, which was one of the destinations for our collab next. So Kyo'mate Cafe is a cafe that has been around in Akihabara for quite a while. Like apparently it's been around since 2001, so it's been around for 22 years, which is, as you can imagine, quite a while. I remember going there with my friend when I was a lot younger, maybe more than 10 years ago at this point. Kyo'mate Cafe, it's a maid cafe but less cringy since they dress in maid outfits, but they don't do all of the maid cafe stuff like going like Moe Kyun on your food. For the most part, they just give you normal-ish food. They work like a normal cafe except they dress like maids. So it's a bit less for those of you who are not into that like me. The cafe itself was completely full to the point that you had to book. I think I was there at like 11 plus, and they were saying you had to come back in like 2 hours, which, yeah, I didn't really have the time for that. So we just, for the most part, took pictures along there as well as in the rest of the stores around that area, because like the entire area, not just the maid cafe, was having the collab. And even though the cafe was having the collab, there wasn't really anything specifically unique for the cafe. Like the cafe wasn't giving any themed dishes or drinks or anything at all. So it's just, if you eat there, you kind of get the novelty card as well, which the rest of the floor did. So we just kind of give it a pass since I don't need more like feeling old by going there after like more than 10 years. It's fine. I'm not having a breakdown. Oh, but before I mention the staircase gallery, there was also the standees that were there, which were for both Akane and Karin, which was once again kind of confusing because unlike the Hifumi and Azusa one, which I put side by side, they had Akane outside the maid cafe and Karin near the staircase gallery. So I actually thought again that these two might be different. So I tried scanning both again, and they ended up being the same thing again. Pretty cool that they have multiple standees as well. Although once again, my small brain is not built to comprehend like stuff like this. So maybe it's for people who didn't notice one, they could scan the other as well. That's why they have both. But so the cafe itself was a pass, but the staircase gallery was actually pretty cool. Like they literally had like from the floor that the cafe was on all the way down to the first floor, like the entire way down the staircase was just covered in art from the game. Not just like the CG from the load screens that you see in the game, but like you have a lot of still frames from the multiple PVs. You kind of had like the small chibis which looked like they were taken from the stamps. I don't recall where the stamps were from. They might have been for Line, but you kind of had like those stamps along the wall as well. Kind of like the funny in-game load screens with the one-panel comics as well. They had a lot of stuff going all the way down, which I don't know if you want me talking over it, so I'll shut up for a little. You can just like look at a bunch of it here. It really feels like they had a lot of different frames that they could pick, and they arranged it all in a way that, like, if you were to just go down the stairs, you could see it all. So it was a very pleasant experience, which made this spot feel very unique compared to some of the other locations that we had been to before this. So at this point, we have essentially covered every single point that there is, save for three, two of which were the Airsoft shop as well as the shooting range, and the last one was Animate, since I knew that that was the end point where you would go at the end to collect your stuff, as in the reward for completing the scavenger hunt. I figured there was no point in me going to the first building, since, like I think I mentioned in the previous video, like, the pop-up store is in the second building and the collection's in the first building, so rather than like making the effort to walk back there, I just went to everything else instead. So after this, I went on back to the shooting range since it was on the way to the Airsoft shop. So I just quickly booked it and left since there wasn't all too much to do there. And then we went back to the Airsoft shop where it's finally open as well. So over there you had the standee or Sauri, which I guess is kind of fitting. Like, it feels like with an Airsoft shop, since it's just full of guns, you could pretty much put anyone there and it would probably have worked, but the gun shop itself was pretty cool. Like, there was a much bigger range of guns than they had on their website, which I had gone to look through as well, just to see if there's anything that's interesting. Everything from like scopes to like the actual like Airsoft guns as well. Aside from the standee, there wasn't all too much for the collab here, so I just looked around a little, shocked myself at how expensive things were, and then we just went back on to Animate, which was the last point and the point where we were finally done with the entire scavenger hunt. So at Animate itself, I guess it's no surprise, you kind of had both Yuuka and Noah there, so you could like scan the thing, and then once you scan that, right at the counter behind them would be where you would submit the scavenger hunt reward. So for those of you who wonder what the whole thing will look like, the scavenger hunt map kind of looks like this, and every time you scan a QR code, one of the point that corresponds to the character will light up. If you actually like try to pen it to a map, I guess you more or less get the general direction of where each of this would have been along actual Akihabara as well, which was pretty cool. So once you were done with it, you just had to bring it to the counter, which I did, and you would get your reward, which I did, which was just a clear file. It's a pretty big clear file, I would say. Like, compared to most files, it feels a little bigger. It could be just that I haven't used the file in a while as well, so it felt bigger than usual, but yeah, that was the entire reward. It might seem underwhelming, but hey, once again, you know, it feels very reminiscent to the anniversary where you kind of got this. I mean, compared to this, I guess a clear file is a lot bigger and, well, more practically usable. So if you compare this to this, I guess you could say that, like, yeah, like everything else this event so far, the reward you get this time is bigger than in the anniversary. You know, like with how the pamphlet was bigger, the scavenger hunt location is bigger. Now even the thing you get is bigger, which, yeah, the clear file, pretty fine. I could see myself maybe using this. Maybe not bring it to work, but I could see myself using it. The scavenger hunt was done. It was not that long to complete. Like, initially when I saw that it would spend the entirety of Akihabara, I was worried about how long it would take, but the entire thing took, including the lunch I took in the middle, about 3.5 hours, so pretty short. I mean, like, if you wanted to do all of it in one day, this was actually a pretty compact experience, so I would say it's pretty well organized. The only problem now was the fact that I still needed, at this point, to wait about another 4 hours till the actual collab or pop-up store for Animate would start. So instead of just waiting around, I decided to take a rest, go home and like rest my legs and stream for a little. Did you know I stream here and there on the side, playing games mostly, not Blue Archive but other games. You can watch that on Twitch if you want. So after that, I went back down at around 6:45, since I don't live too far away. I just went back down to Animate. They begin to move the queues at the same location again, around like 7:20, slightly earlier thereabout. You just went up like one more floor to the actual collab area, and it was pretty nicely designed. The store was themed to Yuuka, Koyuki, and Noah. So on the walls, you kind of had like the Momo talk with the three of them. So the only thing with the collab that was, the pop-up store rather, that was a bit shocking once again, was the sale limit per item that they put up. Like, one per item, as I mentioned in the warning video, was a very, very, very strict restriction. Like, most stores in Japan, for whether they be official or dojin, they would typically set it at 3. The logic being the age-old boomer weeb adage of you buy 3, 1 to use, 1 as a backup, and 1 to collect, and that's why you buy 3. So I guess that's why most stores typically set it at 3, but here it was actually 1 for everything. Actually, like, even the simplest of things, like this, for example, the apple flavored canteen sweets that they had was also limited to 1. So that was quite a shock that even this was as well. It's a bit hard to see, isn't it? There we go. Kind of more obvious like this, I guess. Kind of had to turn off the light, so it might be a little dark, but... Oh, this is fucking bright. Okay. For the most part, the shop was nicely designed. Like, you kind of had everything thematically designed, not just for Blue Archive, but specifically for the collab with the 3 of them. So everything was limited to 1. Walking around was pretty cool. Like, the Momo talks were actually like a coherent one, so you could just stand there, read the whole thing down. There's actually 2. You had the standees for the 3 of them, as well as Noah's Drip Supreme Gun was there. And aside from that, you also had some of the stuff that would be on sale in the future on display as well. So even though the full-size tapestries were not planned to be sold during this event, you could see them decorating the area. Plus, you get to see the weighing scale as well, along with like all the goods being lined in a glass case there, which was pretty cool to look at all at once. For the most part, that was the store, and they gave out these cards as well. I think I mentioned them before as well, which were themed for Yuuka, Noah, and Koyuki at least. Like, the 3 of them kinda had it specially themed, and the rest were just the others but dressed normally. So like 3, and the 4 mates over here as well. So that was the 7 in the set. So they gave out 1 at random. So they say for every 1,100 yen you spend, but this all just came in a stack, which he would just draw from in a numerical order. So since they were printed in sets of 7, if you bought like 7,700 yen worth, you would basically get 1 set. If you wanted to guess like how much money I spent on it, so I have 4 sets here still. Like, I initially bought and had 38 of these. That actually lets you know how much I spent, huh? I spent too much. I know I might have a problem, but someone, as I mentioned in the previous video, I was giving out the sets. I gave out 1 to someone. It's been sent by post. I hope it arrives at your place safe and sound. I'm keeping 1 set for myself, 1 other set's reserved. So I have 2 more sets. If anyone wants it, let me know on Twitter, and I will mail it to you if you don't mind that your address would be known by me. I'm not charging you for the shipping. By post, this is not gonna cost a lot. Like, from what I've checked so far, like, even to the States, it would be like 300 yen tops. The only worry is whether the postal service would competently send it. So lastly, but not least, I went back to the karaoke, as I mentioned in the first video. For those of you who didn't watch the first video, I mentioned then that the karaoke had a themed menu for Blue Archive. You kind of had like the ice cream that Irie ate, the mascot for the club with the funny pancake man ice cream thing, and all that. And I would go back there and try it again, since there were 6 items on the menu. And realistically, I could only order them 2 at a time, since like for an hour interval, it's kind of tough to, well, try everything. Don't worry, you're not gonna have to listen to me sing. You don't have to worry about the auditory CBT. Thank your lucky souls. And also, yeah, I don't want the video to get struck for a completely unrelated reason. So that's all you get. You just get to look at the food and enjoy how interesting or like how themed some of it actually is in a nice way. And so alongside this and the stuff I bought at the pop-up store, I think I have spent way too much money for the next few months. But yeah, that was most of everything in the event covered now. Personally, I would say I had a lot of fun with this. Like, having a full campaign that spans the entirety of Akihabara like this is kind of rare. And considering like nothing like this could be organized for like the last few years, this was very refreshing. Like, part of the campaign was also called like Akihabara Revitalization Campaign, and going down for this, I can kind of see why, because like you kind of get to experience many of the different phases of Akihabara that people might have forgotten or they might have fallen to the wayside. Things like the firing range. Yeah, if it wasn't for this, I would never have gone down there. I would have never known that the betting center exists at the top of Yodobashi. The art museum as well. At the very least, now I know that it exists, so I can keep track of what that is. Especially to someone who has never been to Akihabara before, I would believe this would have been extremely interesting, just because it kind of gives you like a quick like snapshot of like most of what you can expect to see in Akihabara, from the karaokes to the arcade, thin books, every store that you can think of, or like everything that you could consider as helping to make up Akihabara was there. And it was also quite an enjoyment to see all the Blue Archive stuff around like this as well. Like, part of what made it enjoyable for me was just the fact that I didn't like look at which standee would be at each of these stores as well. So like, part of the excitement kind of came from wondering who would be at each one. Since unlike, I mean, you could like check it on the app itself, or rather the website that you were using to like scan the QR codes for all the different ones. But like, I tried to not look at that, just so I could get that element of surprise when I get there. Props to them for putting this much effort into a on-site campaign. I feel like the only two companies that are even buying up ad space in Akihabara now are really just Yoastar and MiHoYo. So it really feels like most people or most companies are moving away from the idea of using physical locations to host things anymore. Like, kind of like how Princess Connect does their online live instead of like holding one at like Sci-Fest. So seeing something like this was kind of refreshing. It feels cool. I don't know if they'll do this again next year. I certainly hope they do something similar. Props to the individual stores as well for actually planning around this event. Like, I kind of like how the firing range actually removed the restrictions they had for like pre-booking, which you had to do online. It feels like the kind of thing that like for foreigners or people who have never been here before, it would be kind of confusing. So this alleviated a lot of that, making it easier for people to enjoy everything. The same for the Animate shop. Like, I feel like they probably saw what happened at Atore, and seeing how badly stuff went out of stock within the first few days, they kind of actually set a proper game plan to ensure that wouldn't happen this time. If you want to gamble on them potentially doing something like this again, I feel like if you plan for the 3rd anniversary event itself with like parts of this period in mind, you might be able to get the best of both like styles of events. So in the worst case, even if the 3rd anniversary does not do as big of an on-site campaign, you kind of still could do other things with your time as well if you plan the trip around then. So I think I have like about an hour of worth of recording here for a video I was planning to make into 30 minutes. So I don't know how long this video is gonna be. Hopefully it's not too long. Once again, if you guys want one set of this, let me know. I'll just give it to like the first 2 people, since I don't need this many sets, you know. Like, I could keep it, but better to give it to someone who wants it more, right? Like, if you want it, I will send it, because it's better you guys get it if you want it, rather than I keep like additional sets that I'm gonna forget I have at some point. Plus shipping is quite cheap for this, so do let me know. But thanks again for watching. 2 videos from now will be Anime Japan, since end of the month is when it happens, so I'm gonna need like some time to record and edit that, so it will come out at the start of April. end of March, it will either be something related to one of those very rare games that never get out of Japan, or about more indie doujin music. So that is, if you are interested in that, you can look forward to the next few videos. Thanks you everyone who supported this few videos up to this point. Like, there were a lot more views than I expected, like 1,000 plus. May not sound like a lot to some people, but to me it's still a very insane number. So thanks to everyone once again. I don't know how the logistics of this are like for now, since I'm at this point like living on the moment when it comes to editing the videos. Like, the editing gets done about the same week as I upload them, so living on the edge at that point. But yeah, if you have any suggestions on events you might think might be interesting to see in the future, or games you want me to play, be it just another very bad game or interesting rare games from Japan, I could probably give those a try and upload a translated video of some of parts of the game as well. So do let me know if you're interested in any of that. Subscribe if you find any of that content that I've made so far, or that I mentioned I'm going to make in the future, interesting, so you can get like notified when it comes out. Click the you don't have to click the like button if you don't want to. I feel like I have rambled for way too long. This last part is a 10-minute clip in and of itself, so I'll probably end it off here. Hope to see you all again, so take care and bye-bye.